Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for another day. Thank you for just letting us, what do you call it, relax a little bit before we even get into your lesson, just to talk. Thank you for just this moment of fellowship. I asked you, Lord, or I asked the question, but ultimately I did ask you, how can we live a more simple life? What is the meaning to life? And, you know, all I know is that the meaning to life is that, one, we were created to serve you. We were created to glorify you, Lord, and I truly thank you for that. Um, you said in Ecclesiastes chapter 12, let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep His commandments, for this is the whole duty of man, Lord. As we uh, go through Genesis chapter 39, please open our hearts and really just teach us something that we have never seen before yet, something that I may have missed in my study, something that my brothers here, that you reveal to them. Show them something, show me something, so that we can learn how to glorify you better. In Jesus Christ we pray, amen. All right, let's turn to Genesis 39. So again, the last couple chapters we learned about Judah, right? And his shenanigans of how, one, when his wife died, he immediately, or not immediately, but he ends up uh, sleeping with the concubine. But, to even backtrack that concubine was actually his, I guess, widowed daughter-in-law, because she was married to the oldest son, and the sons pretty much kept dying, and she was promised to be given to the youngest son, but Judah failed to keep his promise. God dealt with him. She played him. God dealt with him, and we will now see a contrast of Judah and Joseph. We know that Judah, Reuben, all Joseph's brothers really was living wicked lives, right? Reuben, what did he do? He slept with his father's one of his father's wives, quote unquote. Levi, Simeon, what did they do? They went scorched earth in the land of Shechem. The rest of the brothers, Dan, Naphtali, and the other brothers, they kidnapped Joseph and threw him in the pit, plotting to kill him with those wicked thoughts, but instead just forced him into slavery, sold him into slavery. However, we are going to learn about Joseph, who from thus far, we have not seen him complain. When his brothers rebuked him, mocked him, were mad at him because of the gift that God gave him with the dreams, he didn't complain. He actually kept going. Brothers, let me show you the dreams. He wanted to show them the word of God, right? The works of God, the love of God. But instead they hated him, right? He sold into slavery. And we're about to learn about Joseph, the blessed man. Genesis chapter 39, verse 1. And Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him of the hands of the Ishmaelites, which had brought him down thither. And the Lord was with Joseph. And he was a prosperous man. And he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hand. And Joseph found grace in his sight, and he served him. And he made him overseer over his house, and all that he had he put into his hand. And it came to pass, from the time that he had made him overseer in his house, and over all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. And the blessing of the Lord was upon all that he had in the house and in the field. And he left all that he had in Joseph's hands, and he knew not aught he had save the bread which he did eat. And Joseph was a goodly person and well favored. Goodly person, well favored, it means he was a handsome person, well favored, right? But what we learned is that though Joseph was in slavery, the Lord was with Joseph. Joseph was a man that walked with the Lord, and Joseph's walk pleased the Lord to the point that even Potiphar recognized that God was with him and that he found grace in his sight. Now, again, Potiphar was an Egyptian, right? He was an Egyptian. So I would assume that he worshiped Osiris, Isis, and all the other false gods. But however, even Potiphar recognized that God, the Most High of the Bible, was with Joseph because of the blessings that he was getting. This reminds me of what we learned in Proverbs chapter 16, verse 7. When man's ways pleases the Lord, he maketh even his enemies to be at peace with him. Meaning Potiphar had every reason to be natural enemies with Joseph. First, Joseph was a Hebrew, right? He wasn't an Egyptian, right? Secondly, Joseph was a slave, right? However, God has the power to make man's natural and logical reasonings faulty. For when God sees his child zealous for him and walking with him no matter what, God will not only bless his child, but the things around him. Joseph, again, like I stated, and even to this point, Joseph has not been seen complaining about all the wrong that was done upon him. Though through thus far, Joseph worshiped God, and he was a sweet savor to not only God, but also to Potiphar, right? Joseph had a great name, a great reputation. 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 13. And who is he that will harm you if ye be followers of that which is good? I can testify to this. I worked in a place called Lucifer's Pizza. And this was when I first got saved. And pretty much everybody, they were into drugs. They were into drinking. Even on the job, they were into false idolatry. Some wore the little, satanic symbol with the, Baphomet sign on their jackets. And I worked in a place called Lucifer's Pizza, right? So there was every reason, because I was open about my faith. I had my Bible right there. Everybody was open. I was open about that. But I was so cool with everybody. Even when I wanted to talk about the gospel, people had no problem. They didn't mock me. They didn't want to, I don't want to hear that. No, they were like, keep talking. And at that store I was working at, it was being blessed. And I guarantee you'll probably see this within your own lives, that if you're in a certain environment, maybe a school, a workplace, when you are truly walking with the Lord, that workplace, you're not only blessed, but everything around you is blessed, right? And so Joseph, I can testify to this, and Joseph, he for sure can testify to this. Verse 7. And it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph, and she said, lie with me. But he refused and said unto his master's wife, behold, my master wotteth not what is with me in the house, and he hath committed all that he hath to my hands. There is none greater in this house than I, neither hath he kept back anything from me but thee, because thou art his wife. How can I do this great wickedness and sin against God? And it came to pass as she spake to Joseph day by day, that he hearkened not unto her, to lie by her, or to be with her. So now we are introduced to Potiphar's wife, right? Potiphar's wife is the definition of a Proverbs 7 strange woman. She's a strange woman. Though she is a married woman, and, though she's probably a lonely woman, because, again, Potiphar is an official. I guarantee he probably does a lot of traveling, so she's probably alone by herself a lot. Still not an excuse. She lived for pleasure. And we see that just by the introduction of her. She is a person that lives for pleasure. 1 Timothy chapter 5, verse 6. But she that liveth in pleasure is dead while she liveth. So despite how our world tries to water down and downplay this act, what she does and what Joseph understood was that this deed that she is tempting him with is a great wickedness, is a great sin before the Lord. And what sin is that? It's fornication. It's adultery, right? And on the side note, going back to the mention of how our culture specifically downplays this act. I truly hate how our world, our culture in America especially, downplays this act and calls it extramarital affairs, right? That's what they like to call it. Oh, it's extramarital affairs. It doesn't sound too bad. It sounds very, mild compared to you're fornicating. You're committing adultery. You'll have people who will even make excuses for their loneliness, right? Their husband goes out to work all day, and they will commit adultery, and when they get caught, they'll say things like, well, a woman got needs, or I had needs, and they'll make all these plethora of excuses but all they're doing is just proving that they are the type of person that lives for pleasure. And again, if you live for pleasure, you're dead while living. Proverbs chapter 23, verse 27 through 28 says this: For a whore is a deep ditch, and a strange woman is a narrow pit. She also lieth in wait for a prey, and increaseth the transgressors among men. Again, Joseph in reply looks at his walk with God first and stated that he is blessed. Joseph understands how blessed he is, how much Potiphar trusts him, right? And he knows better not to sin, not only against Potiphar, but his master, Potiphar, his master, which his wife belongs to. Joseph also knew not to sin against God, nor sin against his own body, which also belongs to God, by defiling the marriage bed. However, she continues to lie in wait, right? Joseph is her prey. She wants him. She wants to devour him, right? Verse 11. And it came to pass about this time that Joseph went into the house to do his business, and there was none of the men of the house there within. And she called him by his garment, saying, Lie with me. And he left his garment in her hand, and fled, and got him out. And it came to pass, when she saw that he had left his garment in her hand, and was fled forth, that she called unto the men of her house, and spake unto them, saying, See, he hath brought in a Hebrew unto us to mock us. He came in unto me to lie with me, and I cried with a loud voice. And it came to pass, when he heard that I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me, and fled, and got him out. So one thing that Joseph does is literally flees the youthful lust. However, a lot of times when sin or temptations is around, we sometimes we let it linger around us sometimes. I'll give you an example, right? So for those who get caught up with a strange woman, right? I'll talk about when I was lost. When I was lost and there was a girl that was interested in me, right? What would I do? The thing that I would do, if I didn't want to deal with her at that moment, I'll still let her kind of be around. I'll still kind of entertain her. I'll still kind of, mildly, playfully flirt with her, right? When pretty much I need to kind of just leave me alone. Like, don't bother me. Leave me alone. I don't like you. Leave me alone. Goodbye, the door, right? Instead, the wrong thing we like to do, just not only with the strange woman, but with sin, is that we like to allow it to linger around. For those who watch pornography, what do? The devices that they have, they keep all the devices that makes them fall into pornography around, right? If they know that they have videos or magazines, they'll keep one magazine, just to let me just practice my strength, right? They'll start to make dumb excuses, right? Instead of just throwing all the devices away, instead of putting all blocks on the computer, on the internet, to make sure they don't go to those websites, what do? I can trust myself. I can, be strong, and I actually need this temptation, right? They'll convince themselves foolishly, of course, right? But again, we tend to, us men, human beings, meaning we like to allow that sin to linger around, right? Joseph, however, he was in a slightly different predicament, right? And what do I mean by that? He was in a tough predicament, for Potiphar's wife was the head over him, right? And the other and the other slaves as well. She tried to use her power over him to, well, here literally, she tried to rape him, right? Try to force herself upon him. So his situation is very, very different, fairly different from what we can do, right? Hence, this is why I believe the woman in the workplace is especially with men, is really not a good thing overall. We always hear about men who abuse their authority over women, right? But what doesn't get talked about nearly enough, actually it gets downplayed, right? And at times it's almost weirdly enough praised, right? Is when the woman abuses her authority over the men. You have female bosses who may abuse their power, sexually abuse them, men, employees that are under them, right? If a man, I'll give you an example, at Lucifer's, right? There was a young lady that had a crush on me, right? I did not show her any type of affection or attention. I was not interested in her whatsoever, right? Because I did not show her none of that attention, even when she kind of playfully flirted with me, I just kind of shut her down. It got to the point where she just began to start to spread lies about me, right? She spread the lies about me, which got me in trouble because the boss believed her. And because I was such a good worker though, and the lie didn't really match up with my reputation, I just got moved to a different store. Same position as a general manager, but I just got moved to a different store. But it was because of her lie, right? And again, the way she acted towards me, many people assume, like, did y'all have something going on? I'll say, no, I promise you, I had nothing going on. But what the power that the strange woman can do, the things that the strange woman would do to bring down men of God especially, they will go to extreme lengths. They will lie, just like Potiphar's wife. Another thing that a problem in this country that does not get nearly talked about enough is female teachers on male students, right? You see, a lot of times we always hear about male teachers abusing the female students, right? Or male students too. But so, let me just read off some statistics about women sex offenders. All right, women account for 43.6% of adults who admit to having forced someone to have sex. Right, and this is a study at UCLA School of Law. Right, they found that just under half of those who have forced sex are women. Number two, the second statistics, about an equal of men and women have been forced into sexual interactions, right? So in the same study, and to the surprise of many, it was concluded that as many men as women were sexualized against their will, right? Female sex offender statistics are more difficult to analyze simply because there is less research done to investigate their role in sexual offenses. That's also because culturally, we don't put that in importance, right? That's the flaw of the Me Too movement, right? If a woman accuses a man of having sex or raping them, what happens? Guilty. Guilty as charged. No evidences. It can be flawed. I mean, we see it right here. Me Too, right? False. Guilty, right? Females commit 7% of all juvenile sex offenses. The broader misconceptions about women sex offenders are based largely on myth and have no root in the actual data gleaned from a thorough research of this topic. There is hard evidence linking women to sexual offenses relating to children, with statistics of female sex offenders showing that 1.4% of all child victims have been sexually abused by women, right? Oh, the statistics are low. No, it still happens. And think about, and again, they just talked about how a lot of the times it just doesn't get reported. Why? Because it's taboo. I mean, in our culture, men saying, "Oh, I got sexually abused by a woman," most men ain't gonna admit that. They will not admit that. Why? Because a man, you're supposed to be tough. You're supposed to not let a woman abuse you. But when that actually happens, and it does happen, not me personally, but I have family, friends that a female abused them sexually. They don't talk about it. They just don't talk about it. Or they'll tell me, and their reaction towards it is, "Hey man, I had sex with my high school teacher. And this what's up?" In high school. See, it doesn't, it's more taboo, right? It doesn't get the same reaction compared to if a male teacher sexually abuses a female. We don't think the same way towards it, but we should. The average age of a female child sex offender in the U.S. is 26 to 36. These are young ladies that do these things, right? Research shows that 35 of all male victims of sexual assault report a female perpetrator, right? 35% of all males, right? 100 men in this room get sexually abused. 35 of them is by a female perpetrator, right? Statistics on male versus female sex offenders from the National Crime Victimization Survey indicates that as many as 35% of male victims were sexually assaulted by members of the opposite sex. In these female sex offender cases, 58% of the male victims reported that they also suffered a violent attack at their assailant hands, right? Women account for more than 30% of offenders in teacher-student misconduct cases, right? So while some studies show that women account for as little as 10% of all reported sexual crimes, things are a bit different in schools. Female teachers, sex offenders, statistics show that women are the perpetrators in nearly a third of reported teacher-student misconduct cases. School must partner with reliable employment background check companies and perform continuous monitoring on their candidates. And a lot of these schools, that's where a lot of these abuse cases happen, right? In the schools. And again, a lot of these things just does not get reported enough. I mean, Potiphar's wife, as we're about to keep reading, she gets away with murder, right? So don't think that because she's a woman, she won't abuse her power, just like Potiphar's wife. Let's keep reading. Verse 16. And she laid up his garment by her until his Lord came home. And she spake unto him according to these words, saying, The Hebrew servant which thou hast brought unto us came in unto me to mock me. And it came to pass, as I lifted up my voice and cried, that he left his garment with me and fled out. And it came to pass, when his master heard the words of his wife, which she spake unto him, saying, After this manner did thy servant to me, that his wrath was kindled. And Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, a place where the king's prisoners were bound, and he was there in the prison. Now, an interesting thing to note is that even in Egypt, adultery, rape, and stuff, it would be punishable by death, especially for a official, right, a royal official. However, what I do believe was Joseph's saving grace was his name. Why? She accuses Joseph of what? Raping her, but also mocking her, right? We know, and I believe Potiphar knows, that this is completely out of Joseph's character. It's actually almost comical. I mean, from what we know about Joseph, can you imagine Joseph going up to her, mocking her? Hey, what's up, baby? I'm a Hebrew. I don't like you, but what I'm gonna do to you, you just can't see it. You really, I mean, just reading what we know about Joseph, you can't see it. And I guarantee Potiphar working with Joseph, trusting Joseph with all these things, with pretty much his whole house. I guarantee he's like, I mean, naturally he's going to get pissed off, but, usually it'll be like, all right, well, you got to kill him, right? But yeah, I think Potiphar, he just did what he did to want to appease his wife, as well as to save face, because again, that would be embarrassing, right? If your wife is making that type of accusation and you do nothing about it. Verse 21. But the Lord was with Joseph, and showed him mercy, and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison committed to Joseph's hand all the prisoners that were in the prison, and whatsoever they did there, he was the doer of it. The keeper of the prison looked not to anything that was under his hand, because the Lord was with him, and that which he did, the Lord made it to prosper. Right. So though Joseph was in prison, God still blessed him. Right. Like he did when he was just a mere slave under Potiphar. Joseph walked with the Lord, that he was blessed, and he actually blessed those, and God blessed those around him. This is why it's important for you to walk with the Lord at all times, for the blessing that God can and will give you will affect those around you, right? Think about speaking of the keeper of the prisons, think about the keeper of the prison in Acts 16, when he got saved and he decided to walk with the Lord blessed him. And who else? His whole house, right? His whole house got saved after that, right? So we are witnessing an example of when a man's way pleases the Lord, and how the Lord will bless him and those around him. Even his enemies will be at peace with him, right? So in conclusion, make sure your walk pleases the Lord. That doesn't mean that you won't have enemies. Of course not, right? Satan will always be trying to work to bring the man of God down, right? The man or the woman of God down. But God has the power ultimately to make even your enemies to be at peace with you. And he will bless you. He will bless your house. He will bless your workplace for his children's sake, right? That's how much God loved Joseph. And if you walk with him, and if your way pleases the Lord, that's how much God loves you. And you will see. I guarantee it. All right? Any questions? All right, Brother Andy, lead us out in prayer.